So first, a tech company will come out with a new product, and that product will be so competitively priced that the tech company loses money on it. But that's okay because they only need to lose money long enough to kill out all the competition. And once the competition's gone, they do three things. First, they raise prices. Second, they start showing ads. And third, they harvest user data to train AI models and sell to data brokers. So you could spend all of your time migrating between different service providers, always going to the least shitty one. Or you could simply opt out of the whole thing. Now, it's not quite so simple, but today I'm going to break down why you should cancel all your subscriptions and switch over to a Linux-based ecosystem. So with all of that being said, let's dig right in. Convenience comes at a heavy cost in the Big 26. Not only are you paying with your money, but you're also paying with your data. See, these big tech companies are double dipping. They're charging you for access to these services, and they're also taking your personal information and using it to train AI models and sell to data brokers. This is a pretty bad deal. Not to mention the terms of service change with very little notice, and even if you do get notice, what can you do about it? You're already invested in that platform, so you just have to accept the change of the terms. And not to mention the things that you purchase on these platforms, you don't really own. If you buy a movie on Amazon, you don't own that movie. You own a license that gives you temporary access to borrow that movie. See, you're paying for stuff and you're purchasing it, but you don't actually own it. This is a pretty raw deal, and it gets worse. Because you know how Microsoft will pop up every few days trying to get you to use OneDrive? Well, there's a very good reason for that. They want to charge you for access to your own stuff. Right, your own files, your own photos, your own videos, your own stuff. You're paying a monthly fee to have access to it. You're renting your own stuff from someone else. And yes, there is some practical merit to this subscription because it allows you to sync your files across different devices. But you can do that on your own. There's no reason to have the middleman there. The only reason the middleman exists is because of the power of defaults and convenience. Do you ever wonder why Microsoft asks you every week if you want to use Windows Backup? Well, and the thing is, when you get that pop-up, you can't even say no to it. You can only say, oh, remind me in a week. And it's going to pop up every week asking you to turn on Windows Backup. Now, think about the average person. The average person is going to see that pop-up, and they're not going to know the difference between something that is required for the computer to operate and something that is optional that may not be in their favor. See, these tech companies are incentivized monetarily to make that a very blurry line. The average person can't tell the difference between some optional feature that's going to harvest their data and something that is legitimately needed for the computer to function. Convenience is another major factor. See, if you can simply pay a subscription for something that's already integrated with all the stuff that you already use, that's pretty tempting. And, the defaults carry a lot of weight as well. You see, most people don't even change their desktop wallpaper. Yeah, think about it. Windows XP's wallpaper, Bliss, is the most viewed photo in human history. And the reason for that is because people don't change the defaults. People will accept whatever the toggle is set to when they first see it. People don't bother changing things from the way they come. And again, that boils down to the fact that it's hard for the average person to tell what will break the system, what will change its functionality, and what is a legitimate option that they have. But the camel's back is breaking. People are starting to wonder what it's like to architect their own independence. And that's what I'm going to talk about next. So here's the thing. If you self-host your own services, or rather just any services in general, think about what's at the core of that service. And the answer is always data, your files, your media, your stuff. That is at the core of all of these services that you pay for. Netflix, for example, streams movies to your TV, and it is basically taking a file that lives on Netflix servers and it is streaming it temporarily to your computer or your TV or whatever you're watching it on. But at the heart of that service is file storage. Netflix is a file storage company. They store movies and TV show files and then stream them to your stuff. And at the heart of all of this stuff is file storage. So when you're setting up your own self-hosted ecosystem, don't start with stuff like Jellyfin and Image, because if you start building out solutions off the bat, you're going to end up with a bunch of little silos where each one contains a little bit of your data, and it becomes a sprawling mess that's pretty hard to manage. So what you want to do is start with your file storage. Now, here's my recommendations. You're going to need a couple things for this. Ideally, you want 2 old computers. 2 computers that aren't really useful to you anymore. I would hazard a guess that you probably have some old computers that you're not using. This is great. Now, if you don't, you can pick up old computers on eBay for a pretty fair price. I paid about $50 a pop for the computers that I use as servers. Now, once you have these 2 machines, you'll want to start with your operating system. So what I'm using is Ubuntu, and here's my reasoning for that. I know Ubuntu is not the best server operating system, however it comes with native ZFS support. ZFS is a file system. It's a way of organizing the data on your disk in a way the computer can interpret. ZFS is one of the best file systems you can use, and it has one feature which is going to come in very handy. So what you do is you install Ubuntu, and then you plug in your storage disk, you make a new ZFS pool on that disk, and then you install the Samba package. Now, this is the piece of software that's actually going to share your data out over the network. And you install Samba, you create a Samba user, and then you can access those files on that ZFS pool from any computer on your network. Now, where's that second computer come in? Well, that's going to be your backup system. So here's why I chose ZFS. Because if you install Ubuntu on your backup system, create a ZFS pool on it, you can do something called a ZFS send, which is basically a snapshot of your ZFS pool that gets replicated to your backup server, and it uses fancy deduplication techniques to take up the minimal amount of space required. So that's why I personally went with Ubuntu and ZFS for my file storage. Now, your needs may be different than mine. You may have different requirements or a different way you want to go about doing something, which is fine. But my point here is that you should start with your file storage. And then once you have all of your data in one place, you have it all stored together, at that point you can start building out the services. See, the services that you run are basically a front end for your data. I mean, think about it. Netflix is just a front end for movie files. Google Photos is just a front end for photo files, in the same sense that your self-hosted situation is going to be consisting of front ends for your data. So you want to use something like Image or Jellyfin to store your photos, or to serve your photos and your videos. Don't worry too much about those front ends that you choose. It doesn't really matter as long as your data storage solution is sound. So a big aspect of your self-hosted security is updates, but updates are kind of a double-edged sword these days. See, the thing is, you want to run updates as soon as possible because they generally patch pretty scary vulnerabilities. But on the other hand, updates lately have been breaking as much as they fix. I mean, look at Windows for the last 6 months. Every month they come out with a major update that breaks things in a new and creative way. Not only do you have to worry about that, But also, you need to consider supply chain attacks, which are only becoming more common. So a supply chain attack is when there's a piece of software that your program relies on, a library, a DLL, something that is supporting the software that you're running. It's essentially standing on the shoulders of giants. Almost every piece of software that you use depends on about a dozen, if not more, small projects that are run by individuals. So the problem is, what if those individuals get tricked? What if they get hacked? And then they push a malicious update to that little package that they maintain, which is then used by all the services that you want to run. And that's a supply chain attack. And so we're in this weird situation where, on one hand, you want to run updates as quickly as possible so that you're protected against the latest threats, but on the other hand, those updates may break something, and those updates themselves may come with malicious code. It's a lose-lose situation, so here's my approach to doing this. You want to set up automatic updates on both of your servers, your storage server and your backup server. You want automatic updates on both, but you want to set it up so that the backup server gets those updates first, at which point you can validate that nothing is broken, and then you wait maybe a day, you read online, you look up if there's any supply chain attacks with that update, and then you let your file storage server update itself. This minimizes your risk, right? But of course there's always going to be some inherent danger no matter what you choose. And another thing to worry about in general is malware and viruses. It's very unlikely that your Linux servers are going to be infected with a virus, unless you expose them publicly. Don't expose your stuff to the public internet. Don't forward ports. Don't give it a public IP. Don't expose your stuff to the public internet. You want to keep all of that internal on your network, and you can use something like Tailscale to get remote access. But my point is, it's unlikely that your Linux servers are going to be hit with malware or a virus. However, it is something that you still need to worry about. I recommend setting up a SIEM, a Security Information Event Management System. Basically, think of it like this. You take all your logs from all your servers, all your logs from all your computers, and you put them all in one place. And then you run automated queries against that data that will either take action if something is amiss, or alert you if something doesn't look right. I recommend using Waza. Waza is a free and open source SIEM. It is very easy to set up. It's a little bit tricky to figure out how to use it. It does take some time to learn how to actually write the query language that it uses. However, once you've got that down, you have a pretty robust security system with some XDR features. Now, you may be tempted to just put an antivirus on your Linux servers and call it a day, but there's two problems there. First, the antiviruses that you have available for Linux often cost money and are often ran by the same tech companies that you're trying to avoid. The second problem is that the independent antiviruses kinda suck. Like ClamAV is not a good antivirus. You're much better off setting up a SIEM and crafting automations to take action on malicious activity. That's honestly the approach that I've taken, and it's the approach I recommend. So this all sounds like a lot of work, right? So what are the benefits? Well, first of all, you're going to save a lot of money by canceling all those subscriptions. The average American pays about $150 in subscriptions every month. That's like your gas bill or your water bill. And if you can cancel half of those, then you're saving $70 a month. So first of all, you're going to save money. Second, you're going to actually own your own stuff, right? Instead of renting your movies from Netflix, you can simply have your own movies that you can watch anytime, anywhere, without having to pay a cent for it, which is a really tempting thing. So you're going to own your own data, which is ridiculous that we even have to worry about that in this day and age, but it is the way it is. Another benefit is that you're going to have these services working when your internet goes down. So if your internet goes offline, because you have all this stuff on your local network, you're still going to be able to access it. And another benefit is that you're going to learn marketable skills. This stuff that I've described translates very nicely to enterprise infrastructure and security. However, it is a little bit different, right? And it's going to be different depending on different companies. But in general, the skills that you've built by doing this stuff are going to directly or indirectly translate into skills that can earn you a lot of money. And here's the final caveat. Sometimes things will break, and when they break, you're going to be the one responsible for fixing it. Meaning that you can't pick up the phone and call Microsoft because Azure is down. No, you're going to be the one in charge, which means you're the one responsible for fixing it. But again, I see this as a good thing, because by learning how to fix this stuff, you are building, again, marketable skills that can earn you a lot of money. And also consider the fact that if you have all your stuff hosted yourself, what happens if you get hit by a bus? How will your family get into your stuff when you're not around? Something important to consider. So anyway, that's all from me today. I hope you enjoyed. Oh, and one last thing.